What if World War III starts tomorrow? A chilling question, isn't it? This isn't a fantasy, a movie plot, or a dystopian novel. This is a hypothetical scenario, but one that could become all too real given the current global tensions. Picture this: a world where peace is replaced by conflict, where cooperation gives way to confrontation, where the everyday humdrum of life is shattered by the deafening sounds of warfare. Sounds unthinkable, right? But history has shown us time and again that the unthinkable can indeed happen. In the past century alone, we've witnessed 2 world wars. They were devastating, catastrophic events that left deep scars on the face of humanity. And yet we find ourselves in a world that's more connected, more interdependent, but also, worryingly, more volatile than ever. Major global powers are at odds. Political tensions are simmering, economic disparities are widening, and the specter of warfare looms large, casting a long, eerie shadow over the global landscape. The world is a giant chessboard, with nations as its pieces, each vying for control, for power, for supremacy. And when these pieces move, the ripple effects are felt far and wide. It's like a giant precarious house of cards. One wrong move, one reckless act, one miscalculation could bring it all crashing down. And if, or when that happens, we would find ourselves in the throes of World War III. A war that, thanks to technological advancements, could be more destructive, more devastating, and more far-reaching than anything we've ever seen before. The stakes are high, the implications profound. Can we prevent this? Can we navigate the complex geopolitical landscape and steer away from this precipice? Or are we hurtling towards an inevitable catastrophe? A terrifying scenario, certainly. But what could possibly happen next? The first 24 hours could be the most critical. In the blink of an eye, the world as we know it could change. The moment the first missile launches, the globe's superpowers would mobilize their forces. Naval fleets would set sail, air forces would take to the sky, and ground troops would mobilize. Every corner of the world would buzz with the chilling hum of military machines, ready to engage in a fight that no one truly wants to see. Simultaneously, the lines of communication between nations would be ablaze. Heads of states would be in constant contact, trying to negotiate, to defuse the situation. Diplomats would work round the clock, hoping against hope to pull us back from the brink of war. Yet, amidst the flurry of talks, the threat of initial attacks would loom large. In the first 24 hours, the world could witness the first salvo. The initial attacks would likely be strategic, targeting military installations to cripple the enemy's ability to retaliate. Some nations might employ a first strike strategy, hoping to deliver a decisive blow that could end the conflict before it fully escalates. But in this modern age, warfare has evolved beyond traditional battlegrounds. We could also see cyber attacks shutting down communication networks, power grids, and essential infrastructure. The internet, our global town square, could become a battlefield in its own right. In the midst of it all, media networks worldwide would be broadcasting the grim news, causing widespread panic and fear. Stock markets would plummet and economies would teeter on the brink of collapse. The common man, woman and child, far removed from the corridors of power, would be the ones to bear the brunt of these actions. Imagine in just 24 hours, the world thrown into a maelstrom of chaos and uncertainty. The first day of World War III would be a day of dread, a day of sorrow, a day the world would never forget. The world would be in chaos, but that's just the beginning. As days turn into weeks, the war would escalate. Picture this, a globe embroiled in conflict with battle lines drawn across continents, not just countries. The nature of warfare has changed drastically since the last World War. Technology has advanced exponentially, and with it the methods of waging war have evolved. Unmanned drones would fill the sky, and cyber warfare would become as important as boots on the ground. Artificial intelligence would likely play a pivotal role, with automated systems making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. On various fronts, we'd see a blend of conventional and unconventional warfare. Cities would become battlegrounds, with urban warfare taking a heavy toll on infrastructure and civilian populations alike. The fight wouldn't be restricted to land, air, and sea. Outer space and the cyberspace would become new theaters of war, with nations vying for control over satellites and digital networks. But the most terrifying aspect of this hypothetical war would be the possible use of nuclear weapons. Imagine a world where the threat of mutually assured destruction is no longer a deterrent, but a grim reality. The fallout from such an event would be catastrophic, causing widespread devastation and ushering in a nuclear winter that could last for years. Civilian populations would bear the brunt of this war. Infrastructure would crumble, essential services would falter, and food and water shortages would become the norm. The impact on global economies would be severe, with stock markets crashing and currencies losing their value almost overnight. But it's not just the physical toll we should worry about. The psychological impact of living under constant threat, of losing loved ones, of being uprooted from homes, would leave scars that may never heal. As the war rages on, the world as we know it would change drastically. This is not a future we should aspire to. It's a future we should do everything in our power to prevent. Because once the dust settles, we might find that the world we once knew is gone, replaced by a landscape scarred by war and a humanity forever changed. Eventually the war would end. But what would be left in its wake? In the aftermath of World War III, the landscape of our world would be nearly unrecognizable. Cities, once bustling with life, would lie in ruins. Infrastructure, painstakingly built over centuries, would be decimated in the blink of an eye. The loss of life would be unimaginable, with millions, if not billions, of lives cut short in the throes of conflict. The economic collapse would be swift and severe. Global markets would crumble under the weight of destruction, leading to a financial crisis unlike any we've ever seen before. National economies, once robust and thriving, would be transformed into mere shadows of their former selves. The economic recovery would be slow and grueling, with the world plunged into a period of unprecedented economic depression. And then there's the long-term effects. The environment would bear the brunt of our actions, with nuclear fallout and war-related pollution causing irreparable damage. Ecosystems would be disrupted, species would face extinction, and our planet's climate could be altered for generations to come. The toll on human health would be just as devastating. Those who survived the immediate conflict would be left to grapple with the consequences of a poisoned environment. Radiation sickness, cancer, birth defects, and a myriad of other health issues would become commonplace. Mental health would also suffer as survivors grapple with the trauma and loss incurred by the war. In the aftermath of World War III, our world would be a place of devastation and despair. A world where the cost of conflict is worn on the faces of survivors, etched into the rubble of destroyed cities, and embedded in the DNA of future generations. The consequences of such a war would span far beyond the immediate destruction and loss of life. They would reverberate through time, leaving a lasting legacy of pain and suffering. The cost of World War III would not be counted in dollars and cents, but in the lives lost, the communities shattered, the environment ravaged, and the future compromised. The cost of World War III would be immeasurable. So, we've painted a grim picture. But what's the point of all this, you may ask? It's not to incite fear or to dwell on the unthinkable, rather it's to underline a crucial lesson we all must learn. Every generation carries the responsibility to understand the potential consequences of global conflict. It's not about predicting the future or indulging in dystopian fantasies, but about realizing the weight of the choices we make today. The potential fallout of a third world war isn't just a tale of destruction, it is a stark reminder of the paths we must never tread, of the mistakes we must never repeat. In a world that's more interconnected than ever, the importance of diplomacy cannot be overstated. Nations are no longer isolated islands, but parts of a global community. Our actions reverberate across borders, affecting lives in ways we may not immediately perceive. Diplomacy is the art of navigating this complex web of relationships, of finding common ground amidst differences, of resolving conflicts without resorting to violence. Communication, too, plays a vital role. It's through dialogue that we bridge gaps, that we foster understanding. Silence, often, is the breeding ground of misunderstandings, of assumptions that lead to conflicts. It's essential that nations keep the channels of communication open, even in the face of disagreements. And of course, there's cooperation. In a world plagued by shared challenges, climate change, pandemics, economic disparities, no nation can stand alone. Cooperation isn't just a diplomatic tool, it's a survival strategy. It's about recognizing that our fates are intertwined, that we sink or swim together. So let's take a step back from the brink of hypothetical destruction. Let's choose diplomacy over hostility, dialogue over silence, cooperation over isolation. Let's choose a path that leads us away from the horrors of war, towards a future where peace isn't just a dream, but a reality we all share. Let's hope World War III remains a hypothetical scenario, a haunting reminder of the horrors we must strive to avoid.